Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Transmigrated in Bleach World. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 281. Until now, I was in a state of soul reorganization, Aizen explained, seemingly pleased with his transformation. The material derived from the Hogyoku served as the sensory organs for my evolving body. He flexed his fingers, examining them with satisfaction. Now that the reorganization is complete, I have regained my original appearance, enhanced with the power that stands at the pinnacle of both Shinigami and Hollow potential. I now possess the ultimate abilities of both races combined, truly godlike power. While he spoke, Jin proceeded to open the dimensional gate. The two of them walked through the portal unhurriedly, their figures gradually disappearing from Ichigo's sight as he stared with wide, golden-brown eyes. Until Aizen's silhouette completely vanished, Ichigo didn't dare even blink. The oppressive force of Aizen's presence had been overwhelming, paralyzing him with fear. Just as Jin had stated, all of Ichigo's methods and abilities had proven completely ineffective against Aizen thus far. From beginning to end, Aizen had remained utterly invincible. Captain Commander Genryusei Shigakuni Yamamoto, the assembled captains of the Gotei 13, the Visored, and even Urahara Kisuke all had been defeated by Aizen's overwhelming power. How could Ichigo possibly hope to prevail where they had failed? Captain Ikemaru. Looking at Jin's retreating back, Izuru Kara, who lay defeated on the ground, watched with an expression of anguish and betrayal. His face bore a profound melancholy that spoke volumes about his internal suffering. Without the strongest meat shield, as some jokingly called Sajin Kamamura, Uehara Shiroa couldn't help but think that Kara had become the most pitiable figure in this conflict. During their academy days, the blonde Reaper had often worn a smile, projecting the attitude of a sunny and cheerful young man with a bright future ahead. But now he appeared so gloomy and broken, his spirit crushed under the weight of abandonment. There was no avoiding this sad truth. Kara had first been systematically manipulated by Jin, subjected to a form of psychological control, only to be ultimately discarded when no longer useful. It would have been strange if his mental state hadn't collapsed under such treatment. Uehara Shiroa recalled that in the original timeline, Kara would perish during the 1,000-year blood war, only to be transformed into a smiling zombie soldier. Later, upon being restored, he would declare that he actually preferred his half-living, half-dead state, refusing Orihime Inoue's offers to heal the gaping hole in his chest. One could only conclude that poor Kara had lost all hope for a normal existence. The tragedy lay in Kara's lack of both strength and determination. Such a powerful Zanpakuto as Wabasuk, with its ability to multiply the weight of whatever it strikes, was wasted on someone without the resolve to use it to its full potential. Controlling gravity represented an extraordinarily potent ability in combat. It could only be said that the effectiveness of a Shinigami's powers ultimately depended on their Ryatsu and will to use them. For comparison, the current Aizen was so formidable in performing Kido that he could use a relatively ordinary spell like Kurohitsuji, Black Coffin, to produce the devastating effects of a gravity well strong enough to crush almost any opponent. That was the true path of one who would be king, overwhelming power combined with the intelligence to use it effectively. At that moment, the long-haired Aizen and Jin had arrived in a strange, tunnel-like dimensional passage. Looking at the dark and desolate space stretching before them, Aizen remarked with an almost nostalgic tone, "The Dawn Eye? How nostalgic this feels." Jin nodded in agreement. Indeed. As they spoke, a golden light suddenly illuminated the passage from behind them. The two turned to see what appeared to be a train-like entity approaching at tremendous speed. At the front of this train shone a golden eye resembling a headlight. The golden light they had detected emanated from this mysterious eye. This strange construct was composed of ultra-high-density Ryatsu of a unique variety rarely encountered even by Captain-class Shinigami. Observing the train as it hurtled toward them, Aizen commented calmly, "Kotatsu." The Dongai was a special dimension existing independently from Soul Society, Hueco Mundo, and the world of the living. It consisted of several layers of severed space overlapping each other, surrounded by currents of accelerated time. Within this space, time flowed at a density approximately 2,000 times greater than in the outside worlds. In the past, the Dongai had often been used by Soul Society as a place to exile certain prisoners. The Kotatsu served as a cleaner, responsible for eliminating unauthorized visitors who accidentally entered the Dongai, preventing them from remaining in this dimensional corridor for extended periods. Through this mechanism, the balance between the various dimensions was maintained. The Kotatsu represented a pure manifestation of natural law, extremely difficult to damage using conventional Shinigami powers and capable of regenerating itself infinitely if harmed. Lord Aizen, this is dangerous. We should leave immediately. When he spotted the Kotatsu, Jin's normally composed demeanor showed signs of genuine concern. This law-like entity was nearly impossible to defeat through conventional means, so evasion was typically the only viable strategy. Hearing Jin's warning, Aizen took a step forward, directly confronting the oncoming Kotatsu without hesitation. Lord Aizen? Jin urgently continued his cautioning. The Kotatsu embodies pure dimensional law, existing beyond the concepts of death and Ryatsu. We must depart at once. As the dimensional sweeper, the Kotatsu was exceptionally dangerous to confront because it operated according to principles that transcended normal spiritual combat. This entity could affect anyone who merely approached it. Similar to facing the aging breath of Barragan Lusenbairn, contact with the Kotatsu could instantly accelerate the flow of time within one's soul to an extreme degree. Such a sudden temporal distortion could cause the soul to become disordered and age rapidly, resulting in catastrophic consequences for even the most powerful Shinigami. No matter how formidable one's Ryatsu might be, it provided no immunity against this form of rule-based ability. Although Jin could no longer sense Aizen's Ryatsu directly due to its transcendent nature, he was certain that after several evolutionary stages, Aizen's spiritual pressure had become truly terrifying. Yet even so, Aizen could not overcome the Kotatsu through Ryatsu alone, or so conventional wisdom dictated. Just as Jin finished speaking, a brilliant white light radiated from Aizen's purple eyes. An invisible barrier of condensed Ryatsu suddenly materialized around him, creating a protective field. This ability, which Aizen had named Superior Ryatsu Field, was a special technique he had awakened after evolving to his third transformative stage. When activated, this power formed an seemingly indestructible Ryatsu barrier around Aizen's body. Any entity that came into contact with this barrier would be instantly shredded by the ultra-high-density spiritual pressure. If the opposing force was sufficiently weak, it would be completely annihilated on contact, leaving no trace of its existence. The Kotatsu itself was an entity composed of ultra-high-density Ryatsu, representing the power of dimensional law. But Aizen's evolution had carried him beyond such limitations. Chapter 282. The next moment, the two immense spiritual forces collided violently. Aizen's superior Ryatsu field against the supposedly indestructible Kotatsu. Two entities of pure spiritual power, two overwhelming forces met in a spectacular display of energy. To Jin's astonishment, the allegedly indestructible Kotatsu shattered into countless fragments, dispersing into the void of the Dongai like glass struck by a hammer. After annihilating the Kotatsu with what appeared to be little more than a casual glance, Aizen addressed Jin's earlier concerns. The so-called laws merely represent the limitations that certain beings must adhere to for their continued existence. But such restrictions no longer apply to me. His voice carried an unsettling serenity as he continued, when confronted with such supposed inevitabilities, one need only face them directly and break them, precisely as I have demonstrated. Could it be that Lord Aizen has truly transcended the Shinigami? Jin asked, genuine shock evident in his voice as he carefully probed for information. Aizen nodded, a subtle satisfaction visible in his transformed features. You could certainly phrase it that way. The elevation I've attained now has indeed surpassed the pinnacle of what any Shinigami might achieve. My next step is to completely transcend my former existence altogether. Destroying the Kotatsu with a mere glance symbolized his complete departure from the limitations of Shinigami existence. In every meaningful sense, he had already surpassed the boundaries that constrained his former kind. At this moment, Aizen found himself reflecting on the death of Kaname Tozen. He felt a touch of regret regarding Tozen's demise, yet he understood that death had, in its own way, been a form of mercy for his former comrade. Because in those final moments, Tozen's resolve had begun to waver. Before his transformation, Tozen had once told Aizen that should his heart ever falter in its conviction, he wished for Aizen to take his life without hesitation. This was because after such wavering, Tozen faced an impossible choice. If he clung to his past convictions while doubting them, death would be his only honorable option. Conversely, if he wished to embrace a new self, he would need to repudiate his past entirely and accept the consequences of his actions. Either path led inevitably to death. Once doubt entered his heart, Tozen's fate was sealed regardless of which direction he chose. This was the path Tozen had selected for himself, a path of absolute determination, accepting no retreat and no compromise. Aizen had chosen a similar path and shared the same uncompromising philosophy. For this reason, he had respected Tozen's choice and considered him a true friend among his followers. And so, in accordance with their agreement, Aizen had taken action when Tozen's conviction faltered. Now the time had come to fulfill another promise, to bring a new order and a new god to this fractured world. Proceeding through the Dongai, Aizen and Jin arrived near the real Karakura town that had been transferred to the outskirts of Rukongai. However, due to their encounter with the Kotatsu, the transmission coordinates of their dimensional gate had been slightly compromised. The two were forced to walk the remaining distance to Karakura town, encountering several of Ichigo Kurosaki's classmates along the way. Throughout their journey, any soul that ventured too close to Aizen was immediately annihilated, dissipating into spiritual particles that scattered on the wind. To preserve the souls required for creating the Oken, Aizen deliberately suppressed the intensity of his Ryatsu to a degree. As a result, those among Ichigo's classmates who had awakened their spiritual sensitivity became acutely aware of the approaching horror. They fled in desperate terror, their instincts screaming of imminent extinction. Aizen did not view these humans as worthy of serious consideration, yet he saw no reason to spare these insignificant ants either. There remained ample time before the next phase of his plan must begin. He considered that eliminating these individuals who held importance to Ichigo might potentially awaken even greater potential within the substitute Shinigami. Though the odds seemed slim, pursuing this course required minimal effort and would consume little time. So facing the fleeing humans, Aizen strolled with leisurely deliberation. He followed them unhurriedly, like a capricious deity amusing himself with the desperate struggles of lesser beings. Here in Rokongai's Karakura town, Aizen began his reign, moving through the streets with the casual omnipotence of a god surveying his domain. Meanwhile, on the other side of this conflict, Ichigo Kurosaki had begun to reclaim his fighting spirit thanks to the encouragement of his father, Isshin Shiba. Isshin had made a critical discovery: his son could still sense Aizen's Ryatsu despite its transcendent nature. This revelation indicated that the spiritual power of both combatants remained within the same dimensional plane. In other words, Ichigo represented the only hope for their world. He alone possessed even the slightest possibility of defeating Aizen in his transformed state. Determined to save their family and protect Karakura town, father and son entered the Dongai, making their way toward the real Karakura town where Aizen now walked. As they traversed the dimensional corridor, Isshin immediately noticed something unusual. How strange. There's no sign of the restrictive presence that should be here. You mean the Kotatsu? That spiritual pressure train? Recalling his previous journey to Soul Society, Ichigo asked with uncertainty. Is that thing really so important? Does it absolutely need to exist? The last time they had encountered the Kotatsu in the Dongai, they had been relentlessly pursued by the cleaner. Because of this entity, they had also significantly deviated from their scheduled arrival time. If not for Orihime Inoue's timely intervention to momentarily halt the Kotatsu, the situation would have deteriorated even further. Consequently, Ichigo harbored no fondness for the dimensional sweeper. Isshin patiently explained. The Kotatsu serves as the guardian of the Dongai. It's essentially an immutable feature of this dimension that should not simply vanish. I can detect traces of Aizen's Ryatsu here, he continued, his expression growing more serious. It appears he must have done something to the kotatsu, leading to its current absence. But the kotatsu embodies fundamental dimensional law, something that should be beyond any Shinigami's ability to affect. What could possibly have happened here? Really? Is that thing truly so powerful? Ichigo reflected on his previous desperate flight. His Getsuga Tensho had proven completely ineffective against the kotatsu, forcing him into an undignified retreat that still embarrassed him to recall. The cleaner seemed genuinely invincible, which made Aizen's apparent victory over it all the more terrifying. Chapter 283. Suddenly, Ishin's eyes brightened with realization. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully, regarding his son with newfound purpose. However, the kotatsu's disappearance presents us with an unexpected opportunity. A chance for you to master the final Getsuga Tensho. The ancestors of the Shiba clan had long harbored concerns about the precarious situation of the Soul King. Throughout generations, the Shiba family had sought methods to protect the Soul King, even at the cost of their own lives. Consequently, the Shiba clan had researched numerous specialized techniques designed for this purpose. The Moonless or Final Getsuga Tensho represented one such achievement. A secret technique that sacrificed one's power as a Shinigami to momentarily ascend to a higher plane of existence, granting incredible but temporary power. This might well be their only means of defeating Aizen in his current state. The Final Getsuga Tensho? Ichigo repeated, confusion evident in his voice. It certainly sounded like a formidable technique, but he questioned the timing. Aizen was actively threatening innocent lives, and the situation demanded immediate action. Ishin's solution was elegant in its simplicity. He would use his own specialized technique to stabilize the Dongai's temporal flow, creating a safe training space for Ichigo. Within this pocket dimension, time flowed approximately 2,000 times faster than in the outside world. This arrangement would provide Ichigo with substantial time to master the final Getsuga Tensho, while barely any time would pass in the external world. This strategy might give them their only chance to prevent Aizen from sacrificing Karakura Town and creating the Oken. Observing Ichigo as he regained his determination and commenced his training, Uehara Shiroa reflected that perhaps this conflict served a greater purpose after all. War brought not only bloodshed and destruction but also experience and growth that peace could never provide. Without the crucible of this conflict, the resolve and capabilities of both the Gotei 13 captains and Ichigo Kurosaki would never have advanced so rapidly. The spiritual beings of Soul Society shared certain similarities with the scions of other universes. They grew stronger with each battle they survived. Especially after returning from the threshold of death, they could unlock greater potential than ever before. The prerequisite, of course, was that their inherent potential hadn't yet reached its natural limit. Since the night of the hollowification incident and the subsequent expedition to Hueco Mundo, Soul Society had enjoyed nearly a century of relative peace, primarily because vast numbers of hollows had been eliminated during those conflicts. However, this peace had deprived the Gotei 13 of numerous opportunities for practical combat experience. Shinigami rarely encountered high-intensity battles anymore, including even the captain-class officers. The fundamental nature of Shinigami power was order, stillness, maintaining balance and preserving the status quo across the three realms. Therefore, the natural state of Shinigami existence was one of relative stasis. Without external stimulation, the latent potential of Shinigami rarely developed fully. Without experiencing genuine trials by fire and blood, their minds couldn't undergo the necessary transformation, and their strength couldn't improve with the rapidity that crisis demanded. The war initiated by Aizen had indeed inflicted severe damage upon the Gotei 13 captains. Yet it had simultaneously offered them the opportunity to evolve beyond their previous limitations. After this conflict, Toshiro Hitsugaya would perfect his true Bankai. Kenpachi Zaraki would remember to wield his sword with both hands, beginning to unlock his Zanpakuto's genuine power. With this hard-won experience, the captains would perform far more effectively during the 1,000-year Blood War. Shunsui Kayaraku's performance, for instance, would differ dramatically from his current capabilities. To the casual observer, it would appear as though he had suddenly leveled up, and in a very real sense, he would have. After enduring trials of life and death, spiritual power inevitably evolved to meet new challenges. Of course, Genryusei Shigekuni Yamamoto would remain set in his ways, even refusing to restore his severed arm. This stubborn pride, or perhaps fundamental weakness, would eventually cost the strongest captain his life. In all honesty, Yamamoto's raw power was formidable beyond question, which was precisely why he would be specifically targeted by future enemies. When unable to unleash one's full capabilities, even the mightiest warrior becomes vulnerable. As for Ichigo Kurosaki, he would realize Mugetsu, the final Getsuga Tensho, during his battle with Aizen. It was unfortunate that the price of this power would prove so devastatingly high. The chain-wrapped Ichigo and bandaged Ichigo forms were comparable to Adult Gon from Hunter x Hunter or the Vasto Lord Hollow Ichigo, all representing limited-time special forms that could not be maintained. Such temporary states generally manifested tremendous power, often accompanied by dramatic visual transformations. Mugetsu represented precisely such a technique, overwhelming but unsustainable. Uehara Shiroa welcomed these developments with quiet satisfaction. Regardless of how events unfolded, he stood to gain valuable insights. He could analyze the power structures of both Chrysalis Aizen and Mugetsu, using these observations to construct his own transcendent system. The power of gods was never easily mastered, even for one such as himself. Furthermore, he had no interest in divine power that proved ultimately insufficient. Uehara Shiroa would certainly never choose Aizen's hollowification path. Instead, he would continue pursuing the unity of warrior and weapon, the path of absolute dominance through skill and will. Both Aizen and Ichigo, representing the pinnacle of transcendent beings in their respective approaches, provided invaluable reference points for his own evolution. He had already formulated plans for confronting Chrysalis Aizen. Not merely to claim victory, such an outcome was never in doubt, but because such a formidable opponent represented a rare opportunity. With Uehara's current strength, chances to improve through genuine combat had become increasingly scarce. Like the other Shinigami captains, Uehara Shiroa could extract experience and growth from this coming battle. But unlike them, his development would represent not incremental improvement but a quantum leap forward in capability. Chapter 284. In Rukongai, within the real Karakura town, Jin Ikemaru appeared beside Aizen in a flash of movement. At that moment, Aizen was casually pursuing several fleeing humans, his manner resembling a deity idly tormenting insignificant creatures. The transformed Shinigami showed neither urgency nor concern, merely the detached amusement of an omnipotent being. Noticing Jin's arrival, he asked without shifting his gaze from his prey, "Jin, what's the situation?" According to the original timeline that Uehara Shiroha knew so well, Jin Ikemaru would have pretended to kill Ranjiku Matsumoto at this juncture, using her as a pretense before reuniting with Aizen. However, in this altered course of events, Ranjiku remained securely detained at the T-Gun headquarters under Uehara Shiroha's supervision, with no opportunity to venture forth. Consequently, Jin had been forced to improvise, claiming that he needed to conduct a thorough perimeter check to eliminate any potential variables or threats. Aizen had accepted this explanation without hesitation, his focus already oriented toward greater concerns. Now Jin had returned, ostensibly to deliver his findings. "I've checked the surroundings thoroughly, there's nothing unusual in the vicinity." "We can commence at any time," Jin reported, his expression and tone perfectly calibrated to project his usual calm demeanor. His habitually narrowed eyes revealed nothing of his true thoughts or intentions. In reality, his emotional state was far from normal. Logic dictated that at this pivotal moment, he should be experiencing a volatile mixture of excitement and trepidation. Yet his mind felt strangely empty, as though a peculiar calm had descended upon him before the culmination of his centuries-long deception. Within this mental void, certain observations surfaced unbidden. Thinking about it, Uehara Shiroha and Aizen share remarkable similarities. Both maintain impenetrable secrecy, both possess Zanpakuto with hidden abilities, and both harbor ambitions far beyond ordinary comprehension. How ironic, Aizen has essentially become a shadow of Shiroha. "Excellent," Aizen responded, Kyoka Suigetsu held casually in his hand as he continued advancing toward the fleeing humans. In that moment, Jin did something unprecedented. He reached out and grasped the blade of Kyoka Suigetsu directly, maintaining his trademark smile as he said, Lord Aizen, there's no need for you to exert yourself dealing with such insignificant creatures. Allow me to handle these youngsters on your behalf. No sooner had these words left his lips than a shockingly familiar Ryatsu suddenly manifested in the distance. Uehara Shiroha? Aizen's expression changed subtly as he sensed the distinctive spiritual pressure. In that crucial instant when Aizen's focus wavered, Jin Ikamaru, positioned to face away from his target, executed his long-awaited strike with Kyoka Suigetsu itself. A cold metallic gleam flashed through the air as his Bankai, Kamishini no Yari, extended with lightning speed, piercing directly through Aizen's chest near the embedded Hogyoku. Jin. The wounded Aizen's voice conveyed genuine surprise rather than pain. Blood erupted from the wound close to where the Hogyoku resided within his transformed body. The strike had penetrated completely through him, yet even this grievous injury wasn't immediately fatal to his evolved form. Only now did Aizen realize the truth: the Ryatsu signature he detected was merely a distraction, a carefully crafted deception. Jin had somehow manipulated Uehara Shiroha's spiritual pressure signature to divert his attention at the precise moment of attack. Aizen's body and pupils trembled almost imperceptibly. To think that Jin had gone to such extraordinary lengths in his attempt to assassinate him. Jin explained his actions with deliberate calm. The only way to nullify Kyoka Suigetsu's complete hypnosis is to physically touch the Zanpakuto before its ability is activated. It took me decades to successfully discover this crucial detail. His narrowed eyes opened slightly, revealing a cold determination. The Shinigami of the Gotei 13 remain ignorant of this vulnerability, yet they still believe they can defeat you. Watching their futile efforts from the sidelines has been agonizing. He tightened his grip on his weapon. I alone possess the means to kill you, Aizen. Though I admit I borrowed your former classmate's reputation to accomplish it. There was simply no alternative. Ordinary tactics and distractions could never deceive someone of your caliber. With Kyoka Suigetsu's perfect hypnosis neutralized, Aizen showed no distress but responded with unnerving tranquility. I've always known your true intentions, Jin. I've been aware you harbored the desire to kill me. A faint smile played across his transformed features. My only curiosity was discovering precisely how you would attempt it. That's why I've kept you close all these years, waiting, observing. I must say, you haven't disappointed me. In truth, Aizen had contemplated numerous scenarios regarding Jin's eventual betrayal. Yet he had never anticipated that his subordinate would utilize Uehara Shiroha's Ryatsu signature as the cornerstone of his deception. In the depths of his consciousness, Aizen had been reluctant to acknowledge this particular vulnerability. For years, he had meticulously concealed his true thoughts and reactions concerning Uehara Shiroha. His failure here could only be attributed to underestimating Jin Ikamaru's perceptiveness and ingenuity. Reflecting on past events, when Ichigo Kurosaki had invaded Hueco Mundo, Aizen had publicly identified him as an enemy while privately experiencing a surge of excitement. He had believed this emotional response remained perfectly disguised. Yet Jin had somehow detected this subtle contradiction. Clearly, the man's observational skills far exceeded Aizen's estimation. The lesson was painfully clear: no matter how carefully one conceals a weakness, a sufficiently determined adversary will eventually exploit it. The only path to true invulnerability lay in continuous evolution and strengthening until all weaknesses were eliminated and perfection achieved. You used to be utterly inscrutable, a man without discernible weaknesses, Jin observed, his grip tightening on Kamishini no Yari as his smile grew more sinister. But your attitude toward Uehara Shiroha betrayed you. Though I don't fully comprehend your plans regarding him, your behavior revealed a fundamental truth. His eyes opened further, revealing their cold blue hue. Captain Aizen, the reality is inescapable: you fear Uehara Shiroha. In this respect, Jin had once again leveraged his former classmate's influence. Without Uehara Shiroha's existence casting a shadow over Aizen's confidence, this successful strike might never have been possible. From Jin's perspective, the original Aizen had indeed been flawless, a perfect predator without vulnerability or hesitation. Until the sudden, inexplicable ascension of his former classmate, Uehara Shiroha. Even now, Jin couldn't fully comprehend how this transformation had occurred. It seemed that virtually overnight, Shiroha had become an insurmountable force. This mysterious figure had proven himself stronger and more enigmatic than even Aizen, demonstrating superior control and situational awareness in every encounter. Jin had long recognized that Aizen's true strength never resided primarily in his immense spiritual power or his nearly insoluble illusions, but rather in his extraordinary mind. After centuries of meticulous planning, each of Aizen's schemes and calculations revealed profound foresight, almost invariably achieving their intended outcomes. Chapter 285. The fundamental reason Aizen had successfully manipulated all the Gotei 13 captains stemmed from his precise control and perfect assessment of each situation. He had been impenetrable and immaculate, like Kyoka Suigetsu itself, perpetually concealed within an impervious fog of deception. The thoughts and actions of every Shinigami, including Jin himself, had fallen within the parameters of Aizen's expectations. Except for Uehara Shiroha. Here was the solitary individual who repeatedly transcended Aizen's ability to predict and control. From their first significant encounter, a shadow had formed in Aizen's heart, a shadow he never openly acknowledged. But Jin, with his predator's instinct for weakness, had detected it nonetheless. Like a venomous snake sensing the unconscious fear of its prey, Jin had perceived Aizen's instinctive wariness regarding Uehara Shiroha. This represented the most primal fear of all, fear of the unknown, the unpredictable, the uncontrollable. It was an instinct common to all sentient beings, and it constituted Aizen's sole meaningful vulnerability. During his perimeter check, Jin had carefully positioned a device similar to a modified anti-membrane trap, calibrated to release a concentrated burst of Uehara Shiroha's distinctive Ryatsu signature at the perfect moment. As anticipated, Aizen, who had always maintained impeccable vigilance, revealed a momentary lapse in his otherwise flawless composure. The deception had succeeded beyond Jin's expectations. However, even as satisfaction bloomed within him, Jin observed with growing concern that the wound in Aizen's chest was healing with alarming rapidity. White tendrils of energy emanated from the Hogyoku, coalescing into a Ryatsu construct that actively repaired the damage. The Hogyoku's power continued to protect Aizen, even from such a perfectly executed strike. It became immediately clear that to eliminate Aizen permanently, Jin would need to neutralize the Hogyoku itself. As long as the orb remained embedded within Aizen's body, destroying even his vital points would prove insufficient. The Hogyoku would simply regenerate any damage inflicted. Noticing Jin's analytical gaze, Aizen spoke with undisturbed serenity. As you can plainly see, your Bankai lacks the capacity to end my existence. Perhaps your observation holds some validity. I may indeed have harbored apprehension regarding Uehara Shiroha previously. His transformed eyes gleamed with confidence. But my current state bears little resemblance to what came before. I have transcended my former limitations. In truth, he had been momentarily careless during Jin's attack, a pattern of behavior that had also manifested during his confrontation with Kasuke Urahara. This vulnerability stemmed partly from deliberate choice. His evolved strength had rendered many of his previous precautions unnecessary. He no longer required the protection of Kyoka Suigetsu's illusions. Moreover, Aizen had been unconsciously using these challenges to push himself toward his absolute limits, knowing that only through such pressure could the Hogyoku exert its maximum transformative potential, enabling his continued evolution. Even Aizen himself felt astonishment at the unprecedented power flowing through his transformed body. He sensed with absolute certainty that his evolution could continue indefinitely, each stage unlocking greater capabilities than the last. The Hogyoku's enhancement effects had exceeded his most optimistic projections. The might of transcendence surpassed even his ambitious expectations. Perfect. As he spoke, the wound in Aizen's chest had nearly closed completely, spiritual particles knitting together under the Hogyoku's influence. Yet contrary to Aizen's expectations, Jin displayed no sign of panic or desperation. Instead, he calmly pointed toward a small, barely perceptible gap in the blade of Kamishini no Yari. I'm well aware that an attack of this magnitude couldn't eliminate you, Jin admitted, his tone conversational. That's precisely why I implemented an additional stratagem. His finger traced the outline of the gap in his weapon. Do you notice the small void in the blade? A fragment has been deliberately left within your body, Lord Aizen. What? Aizen's expression registered genuine confusion. This didn't align with his understanding of Jin's Bankai abilities. Kamishini no Yari's documented powers included extension speed exceeding sound and remarkable reach. What significance could this missing fragment possibly hold? Was this some hidden ability Jin had concealed even from him? Jin continued his explanation with the same chilling calm. Recall, if you will, our previous discussions regarding my Bankai's capabilities. I must apologize, Captain Aizen, but I deliberately misrepresented certain aspects of my Zanpakuto. His smile never wavered as he continued, in reality, my Bankai doesn't extend as far as I claimed, nor does it move quite as rapidly as I suggested. He opened his eyes fully now, fixing Aizen with his piercing gaze. My Bankai's true ability is cellular dissolution. At the moment of extension, the blade transforms into a fine dust. This dust carries a toxin potent enough to break down cellular structures at the molecular level. Aizen's purple eyes widened slightly as comprehension dawned. I believe you're beginning to understand, Jin observed. When my Zanpakuto converted to its particulate form, I deliberately maintained control over one specific fragment, ensuring it remains solid rather than dissolving completely. That fragment now resides within your body. Aizen stared at Jin with an intensity that would have shattered a lesser being. Jin. The implication was unmistakable. Jin's entire explanation treated Aizen as though his death were already a foregone conclusion. For perhaps the first time since his initial transformation, Aizen experienced genuine discomfort. The complete and masterful deception orchestrated by his lieutenant was humiliating. Even as his mind raced to formulate a countermeasure, Jin took a deliberate step forward, extending his right hand toward Aizen's chest. If you have any final words, I suggest you speak them now, he said softly. But regardless of your eloquence, judgment has already been passed. The condemned will die. With a gesture of finality, he intoned, "Kill, Kamishini no Yari." Upon his command, the fragment embedded within Aizen's body activated, transforming into a lethal agent that immediately began dissolving the surrounding spiritual cells. The effect spread with devastating efficiency, targeting the critical area where Aizen's body connected with the Hogyoku. Recognizing Jin's true intention too late, Aizen roared in fury, "Jin, you treacherous!" His accusation was cut short as a massive hole suddenly materialized in his chest, revealing the glowing Hogyoku suspended within the void. The cavity was shocking in its scale. Aizen's entire chest cavity had been hollowed out, leaving nothing but a gaping aperture where vital spiritual organs had existed moments before. At the center of this devastating wound, the Hogyoku pulsed with gentle light, seemingly untouched by the destruction surrounding it. Aizen collapsed heavily to the ground as the Hogyoku, freed from its biological anchor, levitated into the air before being swiftly captured in Jin's waiting hand. The forced separation of Aizen from the Hogyoku severed their symbiotic connection, preventing the orb's regenerative powers from acting directly upon his devastated form. Without the Hogyoku's continuous support, Aizen could not recover from injuries of this magnitude. In this decisive moment, his defeat appeared absolute and irrevocable. Chapter 286. Die with a big hole in your chest, isn't that what you want? Ikamaru Jin was still attacking. Killing blow. Aizen, who had tried to break the limits of the Shinigami through hollowification, was about to die with a hollow hole in his chest. How fitting. At this moment, Aizen's heart was filled with rage and unwillingness. The spot where Ikamaru Jin had attacked was too vicious, too deadly. The other party knew him far too well. This guy really was a poisonous snake. When he didn't attack, he stayed completely still, but once he struck, he went straight for the kill. The contemptuous words made Aizen feel a rare humiliation. However, he was helpless. He couldn't do anything now. He had obviously merged with the Hogyoku and was about to gain the power to surpass Uehara Shiroa, but he was losing like this. Unforgivable. He longed for stronger power, a stronger form. He longed to become a true god. Looking at the purple Hogyoku in Jin's hand, Aizen murmured to himself. It's over. It's finally over. Without the Hogyoku, there was no chance for Aizen to turn things around, not even to recover from his injuries. This guy was finished. The goal Jin had been lurking toward for 100 years, thinking about day and night, had finally been achieved. However, something strange happened. Aizen, who had fallen to the ground, roared with unwillingness. At this moment, the Hogyoku sensed his will and responded to his cry. The spiritual energy cocoon that covered Aizen's body, white on the outside and purple on the inside, began to release extremely terrifying Ryatsu. Because this Ryatsu was so powerful, the spiritual light turned into a beam of light visible to the naked eye. The intense Ryatsu beam shot up into the sky, shaking all of Karakura town. When they saw the energy beam, Arisawa Tatsuki and the others who were fleeing turned pale. Trembling all over, they said in shaking voices, "What is going on? Whatever the situation is, it's very bad. It's so scary. What kind of monster is that guy called Aizen? There's someone inside. It's Aizen. We're all going to die here." At this moment, several people looked up at Aizen, who was ascending to the sky with the beam of light. Aizen's long brown hair was now flying wildly, and his appearance had changed drastically. Except for his face, his entire body was covered with pure white armor. The opening of the armor below his neck had purple veins, like the veins on butterfly wings. He had a black slit on his forehead that resembled an eye, and his eyebrows had disappeared. Most horrifying of all, 3 pairs of huge white butterfly wings had grown on his back, and a hole similar to a hollow's appeared on his chest. Although Aizen now looked similar to his first chrysalis form, the pupa stage. In reality, he had evolved into his next form, the 4th chrysalis butterfly form. He had completed the expected fusion and fully developed his potential. Aizen had evolved to a higher dimension with the help of the Hogyoku. He no longer belonged to the category of Shinigami. His Ryatsu, swordsmanship, speed, defense, and recovery were far stronger than his 3rd chrysalis form, and the power of his Kido had also made a qualitative leap. His power had surpassed both Shinigami and Hollows. He had entered the realm of gods. This was the power of the transcendent. This was a god. Hanging in the sky, high above, the 4th chrysalis Aizen was like a god. He said with absolute certainty, "In the end, I won, Jin. Even if you take away the Hogyoku from my body, you can't cut off my connection with it. Because it's already mine." As he spoke, his eyes emitted a dazzling white light. At the same time, the Hogyoku in Ikemaru Jin's hand began to heat up and respond to the white light. What? What is going on? Ikemaru Jin was puzzled. Although this Hogyoku seemed to have its own will, it was just a dead object. How could it come alive now? What was happening? Aizen in the sky immediately noticed the location of the Hogyoku. His body turned into light and disappeared without a sound, transcending space. While Jin Ikemaru and Aizen were fighting their battle of wits and courage, Ichigo Kurosaki was practicing the final Getsuga Tensho in the Dangai. Shiba Ishin, also known as Kurosaki Ishin, was maintaining the boundary fixation by himself. This Kido barrier originally required at least 10 lower-level Shinigami to input special Ryatsu at the same time to maintain it. But now Shiba Ishin was doing it alone, though it couldn't be maintained for too long. This barrier could block the very dangerous Juryu in the Dangai. If you stayed in the Dangai for a long time, you would encounter both Jutu and Juryu. Jutu could bounce the entrant to a time axis far away from the time anchor point, creating a time gap of hundreds of years in an instant. Such a torrent of time was unbearable for anyone, only death awaited them. The Juryu was similar to the time torrent, which would bind the entrant to the Dangai and never let them leave. In addition, the time flow rate of the Dangai was as high as 2,000 times that of the outside world. For every year that passed in the real world, 2,000 years would pass in the Dangai. So according to real-world time, the bound person would soon age and die. Chapter 287. Previously, Soul Society used this method to execute Shinigami. It was considered green, environmentally friendly, safe, and pollution-free. Now that the Kotatsu had been destroyed, they only needed to use a barrier to block the Jutu, and they could practice in secret in the Dangai. However, Shiba Ishin's Ryatsu could only maintain the barrier for 3,000 hours in the Dangai, which was 3 months. Fortunately, 3 months in the Dangai was equivalent to 1 hour in the real world, so it wouldn't affect the final battle. There was still a chance to save Karakura town. In these 3 months, Kurosaki Ichigo needed to ask the sword spirit of his Zanpakuto, Zangetsu, about the truth of the final Getsuga Tensho. This required the use of a technique called Jinzen. This was an advanced technique that Soul Society had developed after thousands of years. Previously, Kurosaki Ichigo had learned Zanpakuto-related moves from Zangetsu through brute force, and he didn't know Jinzen at all. But now, in order to move forward, to defeat Aizen, and to learn the final Getsuga Tensho, Kurosaki Ichigo needed to step into the thousands of years of tradition he had never touched. That was to use the heart to comprehend the Zanpakuto, and to fuse the Zanpakuto with the heart, so as to achieve the highest realm of Shinigami power. But this required an unimaginable price. Apart from this, there was no better choice, it could only be like this. Moreover, Shiba Ishin felt that such a sacrifice was acceptable. To a certain extent, this was a disguised fulfillment of the Shiba family's long-cherished wish. Soon, Kurosaki Ichigo, dressed in black and carrying a black sword, entered the spiritual space again. But this time, what greeted him was no longer a bright sky or continuous rain, but endless seawater. He struggled hard and had difficulty breathing. At this moment, someone suddenly grabbed his ankle and threw him into the distance. Then a cold voice came. "How pathetic. Calm down. You should be able to breathe." In the seawater, Kurosaki Ichigo successfully controlled his breathing. He realized that this wasn't the real world, and even if he sank into the sea, he could still breathe. Looking up, he found the attacker standing high above, wearing a black coat. The black coat, like a suit, fluttered in the seawater. The bottom was a black skirt and the top had a black hood. The black clothing, similar to the Shinigami outfit that Ichigo wore, was well cut and fitted, making the other party's slender body appear more upright. It was just that the attacker's face was covered by the black hood, leaving only his mouth visible. His appearance was completely hidden. While calming his nervous mood, Kurosaki Ichigo looked at the hooded man in the sky and said, "Who are you? Where is Old Man Zangetsu?" There should only be Old Man Zangetsu in this space. Before this, there had also been that strange hollow monster in this world, that white version of himself. However, he had defeated the other party and killed him completely. As a result, he had successfully controlled the power of the hollow. This way, except for Old Man Zangetsu, there should be no second person in this space. In addition, this place was different from before. In the past, there had been no seawater. How dare you speak to the person who taught you how to breathe in such a tone? The black-clothed hooded man waved his hand, and a black long sword appeared in his grasp. "You're so arrogant and rude, it's time to teach you a lesson. Just think of it as training for survival." Looking at the familiar slender, pure black katana, Kurosaki Ichigo's pupils shrank and he exclaimed, "It's Tensa Zangetsu. How is this possible? Who are you?" The man holding the long sword lifted his hood, revealing his young face and long black hair, and continued, "No wonder you didn't recognize me. This is your first time coming to this world in Bankai State." After saying that, the young man swung his sword at Kurosaki Ichigo. The two Tensa Zangetsu intersected and collided. Red Ryatsu flashed across Kurosaki Ichigo's shoulder. Kurosaki Ichigo looked at the Old Man Zangetsu in front of him with a confused expression. Not only had his spiritual world undergone tremendous changes, but even Old Man Zangetsu had become younger, looking like a teenager. He hadn't recognized him at first. Thinking of this, Kurosaki Ichigo shouted, "Zangetsu? Are you Zangetsu?" But the other party denied his guess and said in a cold voice, "No, that's not the point. What's the name of your Bankai?" "I'm Tensa Zangetsu." "Has it started?" When Shiba Ishin saw the red Ryatsu suddenly burst out from Kurosaki Ichigo's shoulder, he knew that the Jinzen was successful. Kurosaki Ichigo had successfully entered the inner world of his sword and started the training for the final Getsuga Tensho. However, this process wasn't easy. The Zanpakuto would be more violent than before and even difficult to communicate with, because the price of learning the final Getsuga Tensho was too heavy. The Zanpakuto didn't want to teach such a move. At this moment, Kurosaki Ichigo also realized this. He was fighting against the brand new Old Man Zangetsu. Chapter 288. Now he could no longer be called Old Man Zangetsu, but Tensa Zangetsu. But in Ichigo's opinion, the other party was still Old Man Zangetsu. Zangetsu, I'm not here to fight, I'm here to learn. Thinking of his purpose, Kurosaki Ichigo wanted to stop fighting. Tensa Zangetsu said coldly. I know what you're here for. The final Getsuga Tensho, right? I can't possibly teach you such a move. But I have my reasons for learning this move. Kurosaki Ichigo rushed toward the new Old Man Zangetsu, also known as Tensa Zangetsu, with a determined look on his face. I have something I want to protect. I must learn the final Getsuga Tensho. He wouldn't give up. Karakura Town had his sisters and friends. It was his home. No matter what, he would never give up on Karakura Town. So what? The young Tensa Zangetsu said in a nonchalant manner. What does what you said have to do with me? I don't care about your reasons. What you want to protect is not what I want to protect. It doesn't matter to me what happens to them. He just wanted Kurosaki Ichigo to live, that was all. But now, Kurosaki Ichigo was going to die. This was something he couldn't tolerate. What did you say? Kurosaki Ichigo said with an angry look on his face. Are you telling the truth? Why do you say that? Before I came here, I thought you would lend me your strength and help me. Is this just my wishful thinking? To you, is everything I cherish really meaningless? Then why did you lend me your strength before? The Old Man Zangetsu in front of him made him feel very strange and chilled. This was definitely not the Old Man Zangetsu he knew. The young Tensa Zangetsu pointed at the sea in front of him and said loudly. Look at the world before you. Once upon a time, this world was full of hope, with countless skyscrapers reaching toward the sky. Now it has become this wreck, with buildings collapsing and seawater seeping in. All because you felt hopeless and stopped moving forward. After saying that, he flashed in front of Kurosaki Ichigo and suddenly stabbed his palm into his body, saying, Ichigo, you can't go on like this. I'm going to pull out the source of your despair now. Then he pulled hard and yanked a mass of white substance from Kurosaki Ichigo's body. Blood gushed out, and Kurosaki Ichigo felt a piercing pain in his chest. At the same time, a familiar strange voice sounded, Hey, long time no see, Ichigo. He looked forward with wide eyes and saw a humanoid monster in white clothes carrying a white sword. The monster wore a black horned mask and had long white hair draped to his waist. He looked a little familiar, but not quite. What's with that expression? Don't you recognize me? While saying this, the monster took off his black mask, revealing a familiar white face. It was clearly the Hollow monster from before. That was White Hollow. But White now looked very similar to the Vasto Lord Ichigo who had beaten up Ulquiorra. Who are you? Kurosaki Ichigo looked incredulous and asked in confusion. Why? Didn't you disappear? Why did you appear again? As he mastered hollowification, the monster's voice had disappeared. He thought he had completely solved the problem. Was everything just an illusion? Have you forgotten what I said? White said disdainfully. I said it last time. If you want to completely control my true power, then before I appear next time, you'd better be careful and don't die easily. This master was really worrying. He didn't listen to anything said to him. It went in one ear and out the other. He was hard to deal with. He had said next time, but Ichigo didn't listen at all. In the spiritual space, looking at White's changed appearance, Kurosaki Ichigo said loudly. Impossible. This isn't true. I completely killed you. You should have disappeared completely. The monster in front of him was his nightmare, and it was also the reason why he didn't dare to use all his strength. Although he also used hollow powers, he didn't agree with them. In fact, the more he saw the power of hollows, the more Kurosaki Ichigo resisted this power in his heart. Even the culprit who had caused the turmoil was pursuing this power. In his opinion, Aizen had started the war just to obtain the power of hollows. Hollows and hollowification were synonymous with misfortune. It's really sad that you said that. It makes me want to cry. White said his true feelings in a nonchalant tone. Kurosaki Ichigo continued to ask. Even if you didn't disappear, what's the deal with your current appearance? Why are you wearing a strange mask? He was a little concerned about White's current appearance. Chapter 289. He always felt that he had seen this form somewhere. But when he thought about it carefully, his brain went blank again, as if resisting the memory. This situation was definitely not normal. Come to think of it, you've never seen him like this before. The young old man Zangetsu looked at White and explained. In fact, you defeated Ulquiorra in this form. This is your truest strength. This power was actually a part of Kurosaki Ichigo's power, just like his own. Just now, he had pulled this power out of Kurosaki Ichigo's body. Until now, Kurosaki Ichigo refused to admit it, simply because he didn't want to face this fact. Unfortunately, if you wanted to learn that technique, facing your own strength was only the first step. I defeated Ulquiorra in this state? Hearing this, Kurosaki Ichigo's eyes widened, and he felt his head throb, as if something was trying to emerge. Some vague fragments flashed before his eyes. It seemed to be true. He seemed to have really fought in this state. But he instinctively didn't want to recall any of this, because those memories gave him a bad feeling. Kurosaki Ichigo actually knew that something terrible might have happened at that time, and he might have lost control again. Otherwise, how did Ulquiorra, who had reached his segunda etapa, die? How did he survive a situation where he was doomed to die without any injuries? Why did his body undergo strange changes after that, becoming more and more unfamiliar? He had already vaguely guessed the answers to these questions. It was just that Kurosaki Ichigo tried not to think about the answers as much as possible. Because he couldn't face the truth. Young Zangetsu replied. Yes. This is the form you fear. This is the form you have been avoiding and not daring to face. Because you're afraid that you cannot suppress the demon in your heart, and that you cannot control the destructive impulse that keeps rising within you. Therefore, you have fallen to the point where you cannot even master a decent hollowification. It was because he understood Kurosaki Ichigo and could read his mind. Therefore, he felt that his decision was the most suitable for Kurosaki Ichigo. Facts had proved that Kurosaki Ichigo was not a warrior, let alone a killer. The other party should not be involved in an inexplicable war. He must do his best to prevent the other party from being injured, bleeding, or even dying. So, what do you want me to do? Kurosaki Ichigo's expression became serious and he continued to ask. Is it enough to just fight that guy and defeat him? After hearing what Zangetsu said, he thought that the other party wanted him to completely master the power of the hollow, that is, to overcome fear. However, the young Zangetsu denied Kurosaki Ichigo's assumption and said coldly. No. You don't need to defeat him. Although he didn't grasp all the circumstances, he knew that the current Aizen was not an enemy that could be defeated by complete hollowification or true Bankai. It's us. White said the key point at this time. Whether Kurosaki Ichigo was willing or not, he must face a reality. That was, whether it was him or the Zangetsu in front of him, they were all part of Kurosaki Ichigo's power. Only by facing this fact could his opponent completely master his own power and complete the final Getsuga Tensho. Without giving Kurosaki Ichigo time to think, the young Zangetsu immediately activated his special ability, Unity. His body immediately turned into a spiritual state and merged with White next to him. Looking at the incredible scene in front of him, Kurosaki Ichigo was in disbelief. What? What is going on? What happened? Everything that had happened after the Jinzan made him confused and bewildered. He once doubted whether this was really his spiritual world. Why was his Zanpakuto so complicated? Why was Zangetsu so reluctant to teach him the final Getsuga Tensho? Was it because he was too weak to learn it? While he was wondering, the light dissipated, and Zangetsu and White completed the fusion and became a new individual. The other party's overall image still maintained the appearance of young Zangetsu. White sword, white clothes, and a black horn on his head. There were also some black markings dotted on his clothes. The horned Zangetsu in front of him was indeed a fusion of the young Zangetsu and White. It just seemed that the young Zangetsu had an absolute dominant position. Horned Zangetsu looked at Kurosaki Ichigo expressionlessly and said coldly, "The two of us are originally one person. No matter which one, it is a part of your power. This is your own power, but you just don't want to accept it. So take it, Ichigo." At the end, his expression finally changed significantly and became extremely ferocious. He swung the pure white Tensa Zangetsu in his hand and slashed at Kurosaki Ichigo fiercely. The two began to fight. However, Kurosaki Ichigo was very unfocused and was soon suppressed. Chapter 290. Horned Zangetsu said decisively, "Don't think that you can handle my attacks now. If you continue to maintain this indecisive mentality, you will die." If he couldn't even get past this level, Kurosaki Ichigo would never be able to defeat the enemies after him. With this mentality, he would never be able to defeat Aizen, let alone the man who would come after him, the king of the Quincy. In this case, it was better to let him completely give up the idea of fighting. When the black and white blades collided, Kurosaki Ichigo instantly realized that the horned Zangetsu in front of him wasn't joking. He thought to himself, "He's serious. He really wanted to kill me when he attacked. This can't go on. I must get serious." Even though his life was seriously threatened, he didn't give up. No matter what, he had to learn the final Getsuga Tensho. He had to protect his friends and learn the final Getsuga Tensho to return to Karakura town. With such determination, Kurosaki Ichigo swung his sword with all his strength to counter the enemy's attack and shouted, "No matter what, I will not give up. I must learn the final Getsuga Tensho. If you don't want to teach me, I will use my power to make you teach me. Getsuga Tensho. It seems that you're finally willing to let go and fight me." Horned Zangetsu dodged the attack instantly, his expression cold. "But this isn't enough. You can't even hit me with your sword now. Sink into the sea." After saying that, he moved his body with flowing motion, came in front of Kurosaki Ichigo, and swung his sword. After one blow, the sword light cut through the sea. The slash created huge waves, and Kurosaki Ichigo was knocked deeper into the sea. In the tornado-like waves, Kurosaki Ichigo realized that the other party wanted to force him to exit the spiritual space. But he didn't give up. He swung his sword again and again, constantly sending out black Getsuga Tensho, challenging the extremely powerful horned Zangetsu. Under the high-intensity battle, Kurosaki Ichigo's consciousness was damaged, which was equivalent to his soul being injured. His body in the dong eye was also injured at the same time, and blood oozed from the corners of his mouth. But even so, he still didn't give up. Instead, he became more and more courageous, and his fighting spirit became more solid. Noticing this, horned Zangetsu thought helplessly. By now, his sword has become sharper and more powerful. He has made up his mind and prepared himself. He stands up again and again, but refuses to give up. Even if he's bleeding and injured, he doesn't waver at all. He knows why he's fighting. After fighting until now, it's impossible for him to change his mind. It seems that this is the only way. Although it's not the best choice, he'll pay the price for it later, and at least he won't have to face that man. Therefore, he decided to end this battle. At the same time, Ikemara Jin, holding the Hogyoku, was looking up at the sky in shock. Aizen had been just there, and then he disappeared. Aizen looked very strange, stranger than ever before. Rather than being a hollow, it was more like a resurrection. Then, Ikemara Jin realized that the crisis was coming. But when this thought came up, he had already been hit. Aizen, who moved in the form of light, instantly appeared behind him and slashed with his sword, knocking his opponent down. This was an absolute crushing of speed, strength, and Ryatsu. Although Ikemaro Jin was indeed a genius, and he had successfully calculated Aizen's moves. But he was just a mortal after all. Aizen had entered a new state, and even if he swung his sword normally, Ikamaru Jin couldn't resist it. This was the power of a god. After one strike, the special hole in Aizen's chest released a unique Ryatsu, sucking the Hogyoku into it, completing the embedding infusion. The white substance in this place completely solidified, becoming a structure specifically for fusing the Hogyoku. At the same time, Aizen began to review his life. Yes, I knew the answer to the Hogyoku earlier than Urahara Kisuke. But I still failed. The Hogyoku was formed at the cost of hundreds of Shinigami's lives. But it was only formed, not perfected. After that, I sacrificed hundreds of Rokangai residents with Shinigami talents to the Hogyoku. However, the Hogyoku was still not satisfied. Among them, the soul of a little girl was very special. Because her soul once satisfied the Hogyoku for a moment. But that was all. After that, the Hogyoku was still not satisfied. But what was very strange was that although a portion of that little girl's soul was absorbed, she didn't die. She even became a Shinigami. Her name is Matsumoto Ranjaku, and she's the current lieutenant of the 10th Division. After that, although I wanted to conduct further research on her, considering her relationship with Uehara Shiroa, I chose to give up. However, the problem still exists. The Hogyoku has never been satisfied and cannot exert its full power. However, according to my experimental results, Urahara Kisuke's Hogyoku isn't in perfect condition either. In this case, I will seize his Hogyoku and dedicate it to my Hogyoku. In this way. That wraps up this part of What If Transmigrated in Bleach World. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.